Hi, third grade. Today we are doing a number talks activity called Fraction Talk. So when you're looking at this picture, what I want you to do is start thinking about the kinds of fractions that are represented. Now I know I'm able to name some of the shapes, but I want you to think about what part of the whole they take up. Think about the different fraction names that you could make. Let's look at the blue part of our square. Now, is having this shape be a square an important part of this picture? What do we know about squares and their dimensions? So when we're thinking about squares and their dimensions, how does that help us find the name of the fraction for the blue part or the orange part? How could you partition this shape to find the names of the fractions? I want you to pause the video and turn and talk with a neighbor and tell me about how you would name these parts of the whole. All right, welcome back. Let's give it another try with this example. Here we have some blue, some yellow, and some pink. What shape do they make up? How does knowing the name of the shape and the attributes of the shape help us identify the names of these fractions? How many of the blues would it take to fill up the pink? How many of the yellows would it take to fill up the pink? How many of the blues would it take to fill up the pink? What are some other things you notice about this fraction? Turn and talk to a neighbor and discuss what you notice about these fractions. Thanks for joining me, third grade.
Hey, third grade. I want you to take a look at these pictures that I have drawn. How would you describe this shape? How would you describe this shape? How many equal parts does this shape have? Tell me, if I shade in this one, how much of this entire rectangle, this hole, is shaded? Okay, so a lot of you see where I am going with this. We are getting ready to start our fraction unit, and before we do, we need to do a little bit of review. I want you to help me name what kinds of fractions these are, starting with this one. Can you say it out loud? Yep, these are halves. What about this one? Good, that's thirds. What about this one? Yep, halves again. What about this one? Yep, that's fourths. What about this one? Good. Those are thirds. And this last one we looked at a second ago, that's fourths, because this is split into two equal parts, or partitioned. And so is this. This and this are partitioned or cut into three equal parts, so they're thirds. And these are into four equal parts, so that makes them fourths. So I want you to look at this one right here. We know that it's thirds, and if I shade in one of the three pieces, what fraction might I write to represent this? Yeah, so yes, it's cut into thirds, but the piece I'm talking about that is shaded is going to be 1/3. But I want to think for a second. I knew that it was thirds because there were three pieces, but now I have two numbers, and I need to figure out what these numbers mean. So I want you to take a second and remind yourself, what does this number mean? What does this number mean? Yeah, this is the part that I'm talking about, right? Like in this case, I wanted to know how much was shaded. So that was 1 out of the 3 total pieces. And that is exactly what a fraction is. A fraction is when we cut or partition objects or sets or number lines even this year, and we look and see what part are we talking about. Sometimes in 3rd grade they're going to talk about what part is not shaded. Well, that's 2 pieces out of my 3, so then my top number here would change to 2, but for this one I want to know my shaded. So speaking of top number, does anyone know what I call this top number? Oh, I think I heard someone say it. It's the numerator. And all that a numerator is the top number of a fraction that tells the number of equal parts that are being looked at. So in this case, this was partitioned into 4 parts, but I was only talking about these 3. So that's what a numerator is. Okay? What about this bottom number? What do I call that thing? I think I heard someone say it. That is my denominator. And a denominator is the bottom number of a fraction that tells the whole number of equal parts that a whole is divided into. So back to my square here, I partitioned it into 4 parts. That's my total amount of parts that I partitioned into. Okay? So I want us to think for a second about this fraction that I'm holding in my hand. I wonder if anyone knows what this fraction represents. So if I'm taking my numerator, which is the total parts that I'm talking about, right? The top number is a fraction, tells the number of equal parts that are being looked at. And my denominator is my total number of parts. My total number of parts is 4. And the part that I'm talking about that's shaded is 2. So that would be 2 fourths. You can write it on top of each other. Sometimes people will write it kind of sideways like that. Either one will work. Okay? So, this is just a little bit of a review of identifying the fractions into halves, fourths, thirds, reviewing numerator, denominator, reviewing how to write a fraction. But this year, you guys are not only going to need to know the terms numerator and denominator, you're going to also need to know this term called unit fraction. And we're going to talk about more about what a unit fraction is later this week, but it's where the numerator is 1 and it represents only 1 part. So it's really simple. It's just a new term for you guys. We're also going to be looking at things called a strip diagram or fraction bars. You guys also have this in your math toolkit that you got at your mobilization day. And then we are going to add some new stuff this year. We're going to learn that unit fraction. When we're working with that, we're going to learn how to decompose a fraction into unit fractions. We're going to learn how to take unit fractions and compose it into a bigger fraction. We're also going to be looking at fractions on a number line and how we have to have a certain distance or amount of space between 2 points on a number line. And we're going to make great connections with our number line and these distances the same way we did with rounding. We're going to use our knowledge there. And then at the very end, we're going to learn how to make equivalent fractions, ones that have the same value but look a little different. And we're going to learn how to compare fractions, so know which fraction is greater than or less than another fraction. So buckle up for a great couple of weeks of learning all about fractions. Get your minds ready, and we will see you soon.